This video starts where the previous Microsoft Query video left off, so you should watch that video first if you haven't already done so. By now, a data source for the Access Northwind database has been defined, and it is in the list of known sources in Query's Choose Data Source dialog box. The Northwind database has several tables, each with several fields. You might not want to return all of the Northwind data to Excel as the basis for a pivot table, so this video explains how you can create a query in Microsoft Query that returns exactly the data you need. You have two options. You can either use the Query Wizard or you can use Query's Graphical User Interface, similar to the Query interface in Access. I recommend the Query Wizard for fairly simple queries and the Graphical User Interface for more complex queries. The latter is more difficult to use, but it gives you more control. I will first illustrate the Query Wizard. It lets you specify the query by pointing and clicking. It's a bit tedious, but it's easy. I will first select some fields from the various tables, and then I will select filters. The last step lets me save this query in case I might want to use it again. Then I can either return the data to Excel or first view the query in Microsoft Query. For now, I'll just return the data to Excel. I have several options on how to return the data. If I choose the Pivot Table Report option, I will get a blank pivot table, which I can manipulate in the usual ways. However, I'll postpone this for now. Next, I will illustrate the Graphical User Interface. As discussed in the companion video, Introduction to Queries, I have to specify the tables that contain the required data, the fields of these tables I want to return, and filters, or criteria, for determining the rows I want to return. I will keep this illustration simple, but you should be aware that Query has many fairly advanced possibilities. I will first add several tables, which appear in the top pane. Next, I will double-click fields of interest from these tables. These fields appear in the bottom pane. Actually, the results of the query show as well. This could consume excessive amounts of time if the database were really large. So running the query can be postponed by clicking this button so that it doesn't look pushed in. Then I could run the query by clicking the button to its left. However, this database is small enough that postponing isn't really necessary. Next, I will view a middle criteria pane from the View menu. And I will enter two criteria, that the customer must be in the USA and that the order date must be in 1998. As you can see, the syntax requires single quotes around literal text and pound signs around literal dates, but Query provides these for me. Also, note that the criteria can be based on fields that aren't returned, such as customer country. If you find this user interface to be quirky and difficult to use, as many users including myself do, you can avoid it by creating and saving the query in Access in the first place. Then from the Add Tables dialog box in Query, you can open a view, which is the same thing as a saved query. In any case, once the query has been defined, I can return the data to Excel by selecting the bottom item on the File menu. This provides the same choices you saw earlier. I will choose a pivot table report on a new worksheet. This opens a blank pivot table, and I can manipulate it in the usual way. It is important to realize that the pivot table is connected to the Access source, as I can see by clicking the Connections button on the data ribbon. In fact, I can use this to get back to the query window in case I want to modify the query. To do so, I will go to the Definition tab of Properties and click the Edit Query button. For illustration, I will now use the Records menu to add a calculated field, Revenue. I actually want the sum of revenue for each combination of product and order date. I have already composed the required formula in Notepad, which I will copy and paste. Note that the table name, Order Details, is required in case the same field name is included in multiple tables. And the square brackets are required because of the space in the table name, Order Details. There is revenue. Now when I return the data to Excel, I am taken back to the Connection Properties window. When I close it, the new revenue field is in the fields list. For example, I will break down sum of revenue by category and product. In summary, you can accomplish a lot with Microsoft Query, but it is fairly old technology and it is not very user-friendly. Once you learn the newer Power Pivot add-in, as described in other videos in this series, you will probably agree that it is more powerful and easier to use. Still, I wouldn't be surprised if people continue to use Microsoft Query for several years in the future.